let's try to take this globally now, because many Western countries have either local or national elections in the coming year or two. Certainly, large countries like India have elections coming up. Mexico, our southern neighbor in the U.S., has elections coming up. Is this dynamic that you mentioned earlier about urban rural? Is this true globally? Are we seeing political divides like this practically everywhere?
Yeah, we absolutely are. I mean, turn on the news, go onto YouTube today if you're listening to this and Google the French protests around farmers right now. Like the farmers have marched into every major city in France, including the capital Paris, bringing with them bales of hay, garbage, and manure. And they've sprayed manure on some of the finest looking government buildings in the land in protest to the way the government is engaging with them as rural people. So this is happening in other places too. There's a divide that exists. The rural urban divide has always been there, mind you. It's just now it feels bigger. There was a time when farms were close to cities. Now farms are far from cities. There was a time when was better income inequality between farmers and people who are living and working in the city. That's broken down. So it is maybe not universal, but it is something that we're seeing in more and more nations now, this rift between those people that are living in the cities and those that are not.
That was sort of what underpinned Brexit, wasn't it? That issue sort of, it wasn't the only issue in that election, but when the United Kingdom chose to leave the European Union, it felt like it was the rural communities, the farming communities, those who had some commodity that they were trying to trade, that drove a lot of the momentum behind that. So I guess this isn't new, but it's
No,
manifesting in different ways.
no, none of this is new. I mean, the rift between farmers and the state and the cities has been around as long as there's been recorded history. There's always been some rift there. The value systems are slightly different. The economic systems are slightly different. The social structure is wildly different today. Um, yeah, they're there. It's how we deal with it now that will decide whether we move in a progressive direction or we reverse. I don't know where we're headed on that front. We're in a period right now of a lot of a risk, quite frankly. I don't think that the world has had this many challenges line up in the same way since about 1936. And we all know what happened shortly after that. The difference between, that period of, like, let's say, the First World War, through the Great Depression, through the 1918 pandemic, also known as the Spanish flu, and into the Second World War, is that happened over like a 20-year period, right? 20 or 30-year period. What we're dealing with now is essentially a compressed version of that, where all of this stuff has essentially happened in 4 years. That's why it's feeling like this overdue pressure on us to figure out what's going on. In fact, it's such a great pressure that just a few weeks ago, I launched a new newsletter called New Rules with my partner, Marcia Stepanek. And you can read it at newrulesmedia.substack.com. And we're trying to help people make sense of this noise right now that's out there. Because if you only fixate on the problems, you're not going to get to the solutions. But it is challenging now for sure. And there is a growth in authoritarianism worldwide that's similar to what the lead up to World War II experienced. But what we didn't have in that period, and what makes this current time period that we're in super novel, is that the media landscape has really changed. And disinformation, the use of AI, deep fakes, etc., just continues to grow. And that will impact how people perceive the world. If you're a highly critical person, I dare I say highly educated, you're looking for deep fakes. You're constantly questioning the information that comes across your eyes that doesn't come from one of the major news sources like the New York Times or CBS News or even CNN. You're constantly thinking, if it's not these organizations that are for the most part, trusted, vetted, etc. The AP is probably the most centrist of any news source. You're constantly asking, where did it come from? Who's the perspective? How is it being delivered to me? But if you're not, and you let your confirmation bias slip in, which is what a lot of people do, you might get news from a source that's not really news, that is pushing disinformation, and you say, see, that's exactly what I thought. That's exactly what I thought. It's confirmation bias. And that confirmation bias is typically leveraged by some pretty unsavory characters in their grab for power.